What's up, you guys? I'm Dan. This is Frugal Not Cheap. Crazy, but I've actually now been living in Bangkok, Thailand for almost 6 months, since mid-July of 2025, and today is actually New Year's Eve. With most of my spending numbers in for those months, I can now get a pretty good idea of how much I've been spending. So in this video, we'll take a look at what my budget is for 2026. First of all, if you're watching this around the time of release, I want to say Happy New Year. Hope 2026 will be an amazing year for you and everyone you love. Now again, I moved to Bangkok, Thailand in mid-July of 2025, and so it's been just around almost 6 months that I've been living here, about 5.5 months, and so I've got a pretty good idea on how much I've been spending so far. So what we're going to do is take a look at what that spending looks like, see what that comes out to as a monthly average and annualize it, and then I'm going to tweak those numbers a little bit to come up with my budget for 2026. There are a number of different ways to group budget categories. One of the ways that I like to do is to look at what are really the necessities, then kind of what are the luxuries, kind of like sort of what's the bare bones budget and, must-haves, and then what are the nice-to-haves. So that's one good way to do it. But what I think I'll do today is another way that's really helpful in kind of seeing where are the big changes that we can make to our budget if we want to try to reduce it. And of course, the biggest categories in anyone's budget tend to be housing, then transportation, and then food, and then of course medical care as well. So I'd say those four, medical care, pretty hard to do cost savings on. But when we look at things like housing, transportation, and food, there's often some room to make structural or behavioral changes over time in order to get that more in line with our spending goals. So we'll be looking at it from that perspective. Now, admittedly, I am paying quite a bit for rent here. So I'm in Bangkok, which is a world-class city. It's amazing, but generally cost of living is quite a bit lower than the United States. And it is possible to get a much, much cheaper apartment than the one that I'm living in. So overall for the housing category, I'm spending just under $15,000 a year, which is quite significant. Of that, I've been spending an annualized $11,500 on rent. So rent is just over $950 a month. I could easily find a place for around $500 or $550 a month. That would be quite reasonable. But I love this building. It's a beautiful, beautiful building with amazing amenities, and it's also near the BTS. Circumstances could change, and I might decide to move in the future. But for now, I'm very, very happy where I am. So that's the big category, and a place where a lot of people can, it's not something you can do tomorrow, right? But over time you can make those structural changes, find cheaper accommodation. That's going to have a big impact on the budget. Also things like house hacking and all that kind of stuff. Okay, so what are the other housing related expenses that I've got? Well, I've got home goods, and a lot of that was just one-time spending and kind of getting set up in a new place after moving. I moved to Thailand with only 2 suitcases and a backpack, so I didn't have a lot of stuff. So I spent quite a bit. I spent about $2,500 annualized. The actual amount that I spent was just over $1,000 kind of getting set up here. And that's because a lot of the apartments the condos do come furnished. The apartments as well, actually. This apartment actually even came with a tea kettle, and I don't think any silverware, but we did have some dishes and that kind of thing. And that's pretty common. Then streaming TV, I spent about $30. That's annualized to about $70 a month, which makes sense for me. Then we've got electricity, and that's going to vary month by month depending on the temperature, also how often I'm here, but it's actually not that bad. My electricity bills in Texas for 850 square foot apartment used to be as high as $150 in the summer. In the winters, they were more like around $120, and they might get as low as like $90 a month. Whereas I spent only $122 on electricity so far. So annualized, that comes out to about $300 a year. Pretty great. Then I've got telephone, and I've actually got 2 phone plans. I've got AIS here, where I get, I think, 20 gigabytes of data. Very good. And then I also have Telo, so I can keep a US phone number for 2-factor authentication in some cases. Both of those combined are only running me something like $20 a month. Annualized, we're at about $260, and this also includes a little bit of travel telephone. I didn't want to break it out, but this is like to get a travel SIM card from either Airalo or GigSky or any of of those providers, I tend to use Heirloom. Then we've got water. This one's pretty minimal. Apparently I've spent less than $13 on water for all this time. So that annualizes out to about $30 a year. And then the other major expense that I included in the home category, which is a little bit atypical because, you know, I'm an expat and I'm based out here in Thailand instead of the States, is I do have a mail forwarding service. That way I'm able to keep a US mailing address. And so that service cost me $220 a year. Okay, so that takes care of housing. Next, we've got transportation. This category can be very, very expensive in places where car ownership is high. So that was the case for me in the United States. You know, had the car. Sometimes if there's, you know, someone chose to have a loan, then you'd have the loan payment as well. Then of course you have to have car insurance. There's maintenance repairs over time. There's the annual car registration and whatnot. Yeah, and then there's depreciation, which a lot of people don't actually factor in either. So very, very expensive to own a vehicle. Here in Thailand, I'm using public transportation for the most part. This is the BTS SkyTrain and also the MRT subway system. Both are phenomenal, by the way. I've spent a total of $380 on the BTS and MRT, but actually I've got a bunch loaded up on my card that should last me maybe at least another 3 weeks or so, not sure. Anyway, that annualizes out to $912 a year, which I think is a pretty amazing amount to need to spend on transportation. Taxis have been pretty minimal. I spent only about $26, which is around $62.40 annualized. I did spend a little bit more in the first little bit of June, but I'm using the numbers from August 1st to now just to kind of like get rid of some of that really wonky stuff from my first move. And then also I didn't include the deposit that I had put down on this apartment. It wouldn't make sense to put that into sort of my budget because that's just a one-time deposit. So that's transportation. We're looking at about $975 a year as an annualized spending rate. Now we've got health. And of course, the big one here is going to be health insurance. What I have is Cigna Global, and it's an inpatient plan only. They don't cover any outpatient stuff, but I'm quite happy with it. The premium is just around $2,000 a year, and it will cover me anywhere in the world except for the United States. When I do travel to the US, I do get travel insurance. I did get a policy that covered me for my most recent trip, which lasted about 2 weeks. And that was, I think, $55 or so. Yep, it was $55.62 actually. On top of that, we've got dental care. So I'm going to go in for like a cleaning and checkup twice a year. That was about $77. Annualized, that's $155. And then we've got medicines and, you know, I don't know, bandages and whatever other medical stuff that might come up throughout the year. Luckily, that's pretty minimal for me as well. I spent $190, which comes out to about $456 a year. Altogether for medical, that's $2,744 a year annualized. Next up is the fourth category that I think is kind of like the big four kind of main spending categories, and that one's going to be food. Food here is phenomenal, and you can easily get away with never cooking, although I do buy some groceries from time to time just in order to try to kind of control the amounts of sugar and oil that go into it, and also increase the amount of vegetables that go into my diet. And then also I like to have breakfast, so I'll have toast or eggs or that kind of thing for breakfast. In total, I've only spent $350 since August 1st on groceries. Annualized, that's only $845, which I know is very, very low. But I do kind of supplement that significantly and extravagantly with restaurants. I've spent about $878 on restaurants so far. This includes kind of like my half of what I might spend on a date because, well, I don't know. Actually, girlfriend and I are eating together quite a lot, so it's kind of hard to say that it's just, they're all dates. I don't know. Sometimes it's just we're having lunch, right? But anyway, that comes out to $2,100, so over double the amount that I'm spending on groceries, and I think that kind of makes sense here in Bangkok. Do spend a bit on coffee shops. That's things like Starbucks, etc. Spend about $39, which comes out to $94 a year. And finally, I didn't know where else to put it, but I think personal care items make sense here. Going forward, mostly I just kind of lump this into the groceries category. It's kind of getting tiresome faffing around receipts and trying to figure out what goes exactly in which category. So for the most part these days, I just go by where did I buy, where did I go shopping, and then put it into the category based on that. It's a lot easier. But anyway, I spent about $45 on personal care, and that's about $110 a year. All told, the sort of food category comes out to $3,150 a year. So right there, between those four categories, we've got the bulk of my spending since August the 1st. But we do have a few categories left, and some of these were kind of hard to categorize, so I just kind of have this sort of other grouping. One thing is wire fees, and I moved quite a bit of money this year because I'm not a tax resident of Thailand this year. And so I remitted income into Thailand while not being a tax resident, so that in years where I am a tax resident, I will need to remit less. That was kind of the strategy there. But anyway, Charles Schwab, which is amazing, by the way. I've got Schwab Investor Checking and a brokerage account, and I love them. That comes out to $15 a wire that I initiate myself online. So not too bad. I spent about $60 on wire fees. I have spent quite a bit on clothing, again, because I came in here with only 2 suitcases and a backpack. And also in order to get it's a good opportunity to refresh items or to change the wardrobe in order to suit the new climate, that kind of thing. I spent $414 on clothing, which would be $1,000 a year, but that's probably not what I'm going to be spending moving forward. More on that in the budget section. Okay, then I spent a little bit on postage, not really worth mentioning, and $165 in charitable contributions. And then we've also got software. This is basically, I think it's called Google One, which is their 1 or 2 terabyte storage option. So I've got that to hold all my photos and all my stuff. Just nice to have it all safely on the cloud. In addition to that, I'm also using Quicken. I have an older review of the product. I may do kind of refresh review of Quicken in 2026. People seem to be interested in the product, so I might do that this year as well. But anyway, that comes out to a little over $200 a year. And then I spent a little bit on learning the Thai language. I do aim to ramp that up in the future, but for now I've only spent $35 on books and software. So overall, for this kind of other catch-all category, kind of a messy one, $2,150 just about. All right, so that covers I think most of the stuff that's kind of like really necessary. Not all of it, right? Like there's some tweaks that can be made, but generally that's kind of like your basics. And the next 2 categories are really sort of, more like wants rather than needs. I mean, important for me, but things that in the event that I really needed to kind of tighten up and buckle up the belt, these would be things that we could look at strongly in terms of reducing the amount of spend. So first we've got sort of general entertainment. I spent about $310 on that. Annualizes out to about $740 a year. And then we've got dating, where I've spent about $1,250 so far. That annualizes out to about $3,000. So that's a pretty significant amount to spend on dating here in Bangkok, mostly because, we spend a ton of time together. So it's very unlike where I might meet someone for, 1 or 2 meals a week, right? This is a lot more than that, and that's why it's adding up to be that much. Overall, for the entertainment category, we're at $3,750 a year. And then the final category is definitely a luxury as well, and this is the travel category. So I've spent about $1,100 on airfare, I spent just under $300 on hotels, $31 on parking, about $7 on public transit, this was mostly Taiwan, and $465 on rental car and taxi. A lot of that was that 2025 Tesla Model 3 rear-wheel drive that was featured in 2 of my more recent videos, showing off, one, a quick tour of the car and kind of my review. Not a quick tour, a long tour of the car in my quick review. And then also full self-driving version 14. So check those 2 videos out. I thought they were pretty cool. In any event, that was quite a bit of travel spending, and it would annualize out to $4,500. But that's again going to be much higher than my typical spend. So what is my typical spend going to be? Well, let's take a look at that. But before I do, just to kind of highlight the point that I was making about what are the big categories, here's a pie chart of all the spending, my annualized spending based on my run rate from, since August the 1st. You can see housing makes up the biggest portion of it at 46%. Food's just around 10%, so quite significant as well. But here, transportation and medical, thankfully, are relatively low. And then you can see I spent quite a bit on travel and entertainment. So that's kind of probably a larger share of the pie than would be advisable generally, but I'm pretty comfortable with my spending rate at the moment. Okay, so how about my actual budget for 2026? And I'm going to run through this pretty quickly because most of the numbers haven't really changed, and I don't want to kind of double the length of this video for you, right? Not cool. So rent's going to stay the same, $950 a month. Home goods comes down to just $25 a month. Streaming TV at $10, electricity at $25, telephone at $22, water at $3, and the mail service averages out to $20 a month with a little wiggle room for inflation. Puts total housing at $12,700 a year. Then for transportation, we've got public transit at $75, and taxi at $750. You never know, every now and then you need one. For overall transport of just under $1,000 a year. Dental is still $13. Health insurance around $167, and then medicines at about $40 a month. These again have all pretty much stayed the same, and so that's $2,640 a year. For the miscellaneous stuff, we've got the wire fees at around $13. I think that's actually kind of high. I'll probably do fewer wires in the future, but I don't know. And it's a negligible amount anyway, so we'll just keep it in there. I don't know, could soak up other fees that I may incur. Then we've got clothing at $21 a month, post and delivery at under $1, charitable contributions at $30, software still $220 a year. And then the Thai lessons we budgeted $90, but hopefully, yeah, well, I guess that should probably cover it. Then we've got entertainment at $60 and dating at $250, so still a pretty healthy budget for those items. Those are $720 and $3,000 a year, respectively, so I'd say that dating category is pretty healthy. And then, of course, we do still want to do some travel, so I budgeted about $2,000 a year for airfare, another $500 for hotels, and another $120 for some kind of ground transportation when I'm abroad. So overall, that's $2,620 in travel. We'll see if I can stick to that. This year was a pretty crazy travel year. Next year might be a little lighter. Who knows? We shall see. In any event, that comes out to a monthly total of $2,240, which is pretty great because that puts my overall budget at just under $27,000, which I think is phenomenal for the lifestyle that I get to live here in Bangkok, Thailand. And again, a lot of that is discretionary spending. I mean, just the travel and entertainment is over $6,000. So I could easily get this to around maybe $21,000 or $22,000 a year if I needed to. But I'm very, very fortunate that I don't actually have to do that, and I can continue to enjoy this wonderful lifestyle in this beautiful city. What do you guys think about that budget for Bangkok, Thailand in 2026? Do let us know in the comments below. Hope you enjoyed today's video. If you did, please hit the like button and consider subscribing. Thank you very much for watching, and I'll see you in the next video.